Today I'm speaking with Dee Murphy. Dee, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome.
And we also have Dee's daughter, Stacie Grahn. Stacie, thank you for joining me again today.
Thank you for having me again.
Absolutely. And for anyone that doesn't know, I did do an interview with Stacie a few weeks ago. If people that follow her, she's known as, with the handle Apostasy, but I'll have all the links for her work as well beneath our video. And Dee, I'm going to give a quick bio for you, and then you can tell us some more things about yourself. I know you live in Vernon, British Columbia, and you're the mother of two and the grandmother of three, and you're an avid baker and a wine connoisseur. And we're going to get into your story a little bit later, but she was a Christian since a young age 7. She came out as an atheist about 2 years ago, but she was a closet atheist for several years before that. Besides that big picture bio, what else can we know about you?
Well, I wouldn't say wine connoisseur, but I do love wine. Well,
Okay,
connoisseur, yeah, just not an expert, but yeah, okay.
We live
on
in
that
wine.
on that
We do
trajectory.
live in wine country. Yeah, we do live in wine country. Love true crime. I'm addicted to true crime. I watch a lot of the true crime YouTubers. What else?
She's up early. She likes to bake. She's an amazing baker.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah,
What's your
love to do that.
She's a
what's
great
your
homemaker.
what's your favorite one or two things to bake?
Bread, cakes, cookies, and I love to make soup, homemade
Nice,
soups, yeah, with biscuits and stuff.
very
So
cool.
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
get time too much to do, but one of my favorite things to do is, have you ever seen those little Debbie Swiss roll cakes where it's like chocolate?
yeah, yep,
I
yep,
make like the big Betty Crocker
yep.
version.
Jelly
Oh,
rolls.
I love
Yeah,
those.
yeah, yeah.
Good stuff. Well, we're here obviously to hear your story, but since we have both you, Dee, and your daughter Stacie, we're gonna kind of hear from both of you, but we're primarily here to hear from Dee. So, I'd love to hear your story, where you came from spiritually.
Okay. Well, when I was around 6 or 7, my mother was really struggling in her personal life. And the story that I heard was she was contemplating suicide. And she had my little sister and I strapped in the back seat of the car and was going to drive us all off a pier into the ocean.
Hmm.
And she says she heard an audible voice say, "You can do that to yourself, but you cannot do that to them." And so then she spent the afternoon knocking on doors of people she knew, trying to find somewhere to leave the two of us, but she couldn't find anyone home. So that's what saved her life, our lives, I guess. I don't know.
Hmm.
And then she ended up going to a cousin-in-law who was a born-again Christian, sat in the kitchen and kind of just poured her heart out. And she was invited to a weekend retreat across the border. We lived in British Columbia, where we still do. She went across the border into Washington State. And at that time, the Jesus People, Jesus Freak movement was in full swing. And she came back full on born again Christian.
Hmm.
Just the whole, the whole commune, Jesus
Tent
People,
revival.
yeah, the headbands and the beads and everybody was just,
So
yeah.
it was like a hippie Christian,
Yes,
hippie Christianity.
yes, yeah, it was.
Hmm.
So that became my reality. And just any traveling, I was going to say traveling salesman, which is basically what they were, but traveling preachers coming through town and my childhood. And I still, when I think about it, I see it from child's view, halfway down with, the backs of adults, and trying to peek through and seeing the front and just people laying all over the place and behaving ridiculously. And sometimes being taken up to the front by my mom for prayer for whatever.
Hmm. So it
And
sounds very charismatic.
I was
oh,
gonna say, yeah, like
extremely charismatic,
the speaking in
extremely,
tongues.
Did
all of
they
that
Were you
loud.
seeing things that they claimed were miracles?
Oh yeah, that was just normal. I mean, it
Hmm.
was nuts. It was crazy. It was crazy, and it just got crazier and crazier and crazier. And if it wasn't crazy, they were not on fire for God, and it was boring, dull, and dry. and a dry church was not a church where they were going to heaven. Yeah. So
Hmm. So
anyway,
can I ask, did you, as a young
yep,
child, I assume you believed that the miracles that you were seeing or that they were talking about had actually happened?
I assumed so. I
Hmm.
assumed they were. I never saw anything actually happen, but you just took people's word for it at that point. I mean, it's the 70s. I was a little girl. I just assumed. I assumed they were telling the truth. You just like you assumed, yeah. Just like you assumed your presents on Christmas morning were actually from Santa.
Yeah.
Until the one Christmas morning something showed up that I saw my mom put in the cart at Kmart.
In the House of Cards
I
crumbles.
remembered, yeah, it was a hand puppet. And I'm like, I was there when that was put in the cart. So that's when that House of Cards came tumbling down. Anyway,
Hmm. It's an
so
amazing context. I just want to say it's amazing context. Just that version of Christianity is not one that I'm used to at all. And but it
oh,
sounds fascinating. Just I mean, in a
oh,
not like in a good or bad sense, just really different and kind of crazy. But at the same point, I could see the fervor would just make people feel like they're just on fire for the Lord. I can definitely
Oh,
get it.
definitely.
it's insane. And also you hear a lot about the term backslidden. So if
Mhm.
someone kind of doesn't come to church for a few months, or they can't keep up that
The excitement or just the, I guess,
what's it called?
excitement.
Yeah, the excitement, and just you can't stay on that treadmill forever. You just can't. It's exhausting. So if you don't see someone for a few months, you're like, hey, let's say, where's Dave? Where's Dave? You're like, oh, he's backslidden. We got to pray for him. Somebody's got to go visit him. He's backslidden. So you
Hmm.
go to Dave's place and someone talks him into coming back, and next thing you know, or Dave's smoking, so he's definitely backslidden. We got to pray the spirit of tobacco out of him. Literally, I'm not kidding you. You got to pray the spirit of tobacco out of him. And once you pray it out of him, if he lets it back in, he's going to bring demons 7 times stronger with him. And then like, this is just, it's all insanity. Anyway,
Hmm.
so you hear about backslidden people a lot and it freaks you out. It scares you. I literally, from the time I was really little, I heard from the pulpit more times than I can tell you, for people who were freshly getting saved, freshly, like people like, okay, answer an altar call, come up here. I heard more than once a pastor say, he was joking, but they would say, get up here, we're going to save you, we're going to bring up back and shoot you so you don't have time to backslide. We'll just shoot you back so you can go straight to heaven. You don't have time to backslide. They
Wow.
were joking, but they were teaching you that if you backslide and you happen to die in the state of being backslidden, you go to hell.
Hmm.
So it was
That's
just,
crazy.
I know. And then how do you reconcile that with the scriptures that you read that say, I will never leave you or forsake you? So it was just freaky and scary and awful when you're a kid. You never feel like you measure up. And one day you might feel super close to God, and then the next day not as close. Or am I backslidden? What have I done? Why don't I feel as close to God today as I did last Sunday? What have I done? And it's just it's a treadmill in your mind that it's exhausting, and you just feel like you've always got to be on it and running. Like, yeah. So
Hmm.
anyway.
I would assume
Um,
that there's certain personalities though that could really thrive in that. Did you feel like there
the
were certain
crazy
people that
people.
were, yeah,
I
just
think
good
I
to,
think people who kind of, when I think back to, just because I grew up in the same types of churches just because of my grandmother, a lot of people who just struggled, I hate to say it, like just mentally,
Yeah,
like with
they were all the eccentric ones.
yeah, they had a lot of eccentric personalities.
We call them
A
the
lot,
hat lady,
yeah,
or the dancing lady,
yeah,
or the
they
flag lady.
were eccentric. I
Yeah.
don't want to say mental problem,
hmm.
but just there was just something that was a little like different about them, and also like financial. They people just were never very like financially secure.
Mhm.
Yeah, there was a certain type of people that were sort of drawn in because I don't know. This just is thinking back with 2020, like just
And the
perspective.
people that had money,
Mhm.
they were always the one that were in eldership.
Yeah.
If you think about it,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of specific people.
Yeah.
If they were people that had a lot of money, they were made elders in the church. So they were the ones in the front row.
Yeah.
You never sat in their chairs ever.
Yeah. It's a lot like multi-level marketing
Yeah.
too. When I think about it, it's always the people who do really well in the beginning, they're elevated as the ones you want to strive to be like,
Or be their friends.
or be their friends. And then it's people who are really struggling, they kind of bring them in and with this promise of you're going to get rich, you're going to do well.
Yeah.
There's a lot of similarities I find with the charismatic church movement with multi-level marketing.
Reminds me of a little bit with the elder thing. Church I went to when I was in Pennsylvania near Philadelphia, it had a nickname of the Blue Church because it was made of Pennsylvania blue limestone, and when it got cold and wet, it turned blue.
Oh,
But the official name, like the legal name, was called Lowndes Free Church. Pastor Lowndes had filmed it, a long time ago, long before I was born. But it was at a time when a lot of churches were actually charging for seats. Like you would literally pay for your family's row, and so it was called Lowndes Free Church, so you could come
it's
and
not
not pay anything.
free.
But isn't that amazing? But
Wow.
with your background, or with the background of that church, I'm just guessing here, but is it fair to say there were people telling you that God was giving them messages to tell you? Or
Oh, heck yeah.
okay.
The
What were
Lord
the
has given me a word for you.
what kind of
Thus
stuff did you
saith the
hear?
Lord. Oh my God. Everything. There was people who were being told who to marry.
Mhm.
Wow.
Tell the story of the one guy, because this creeps me out now. It creeped me out when I was younger, but because I was told it was, wow, this is an amazing story. That one guy who was told God told him to marry that young girl. Please,
Oh,
this one,
yes. Okay. We attended
a
a
good
church
example.
right here in this town when she was only 3. And there was an elder in the church who had a few kids, but a couple of them were daughters. And he had one older daughter and one younger daughter. And there was one guy in the church who had been praying about who to marry. And he was over the age of 18. He was over the age of consent. And he went to one of the elders who had a daughter who was probably 13 or 14, but he also had a daughter who was 9. And he went to the elder and his wife and he said, I've been praying and the Lord has told me that I'm to wait for your 9-year-old daughter to turn 18 and she's my wife. And the elder's response was, well, it's about time you heard from the Lord. We've known that for a couple of years already. And he literally waited for her to turn the age of consent. And this girl was told at the age of 9, that man is the man you're going to marry. And she was never given a choice. She grew up knowing that's who she'd marry. And that's who she's married to to this day.
That's crazy.
And I have asked about her,
Mhm.
and I've heard that she has had a lot of mental issues.
Yeah.
She's not great.
Yeah. That's a mind job right there.
And very predatory.
Yeah.
Like as an adult.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind
So
of
she
thing.
grew up with this man in this church, just waiting around the corner, waiting for her just to
As a
turn
young girl.
18.
Yeah.
And boom, that's
Wow.
who you're marrying.
Because God supposedly told him.
Wow.
So, I
There's
mean,
so many things that are crazy
So
about
many
that.
things wrong with that.
So can I ask for Dee, for your part of your journey, at what age would you say that you personally believed it as opposed to just being part of the, going with your
Okay.
family?
Here's the thing. I don't know that I ever did, because the year I turned 30, we were living here again. We've moved back and forth out of this town a few times. But the year I turned 30 is the year I really and truly wanted to walk away. And that was the year I spent that summer asking myself, out loud when I was alone, do I actually believe because I believe, or do I believe because this is the way I was brought up? And I would have just completely walked away if the man I was married to, who really wasn't a practicing Christian, but he was American, and he was one of those Americans who was brought up by a Southern Baptist mother from the United States. And he was just one of those, just, you believe in Jesus because you believe in Jesus, right? And he wasn't practicing either, but he was just, you know how people just say they're Christian because they say they're Christian?
Culturally.
Yeah. So he called one of my friends who's from here, and she just talked me right back into it. But if he'd left me alone, I would have deconstructed entirely that summer.
That would have been 1994.
Yeah.
About how old would you have been, Stacie?
10.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Because I wanted nothing to do with it. I didn't even know the word deconstructing, but I was starting to pull away and starting to realize, because my mom wasn't living in the same town. I was away from her, and I was really starting to realize my mind was clearing. And I don't even know why it mattered to him. And I was doing what Stacie did when you deconstructed finally.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was doing that summer.
Yeah.
So, and
What
I
was the
think
messaging, just that it was like, stop doubting, it's really real, or was it more cultural? Like, what were the arguments to keep you in?
the devil is just working on your mind. Don't let the devil in.
Interesting.
And my fear was hell. Even when Stacie came to me and said, I don't believe in God anymore. And I was like, yes, I didn't either. But my thing was the fear of hell. I still, every so often, up until just a couple days ago, when Jimmy Snow gave a really good thing to do with your brain when you start worrying about hell, I still was worried a lot about hell. I know it sounds crazy. A lot of people, that's a thing, I guess.
Yeah.
So I didn't believe in God. But I had this fear of hell that was just so indoctrinated into me in almost every fiber of my being. So when she came to me, and said, it's just the devil, don't do this. You do not want to spend eternity burning in a lake of fire. You better reel it in. I was like, okay. Like, I still didn't believe in God, because my thing was, I was married to a man who I was in fear of. He was abusive. He was narcissistic. He's dead now. So, but, he was horrible. When I finally did get away from him, Stacie and I had to go to a battered women's shelter. My son, they told me that I couldn't bring a male child into this battered women's shelter. I found out later that wasn't true, but I got my son in. I sent him to where we were going to go, and I was able to let him go and stay with his best friend and his best friend's family until Stacie and I could get back to where we were going. But that was my final break, and I was able to get away from that man. He's the same man who called this Christian and said, she's slipping away, you better come and help. But I think what he liked was having a Christian wife, because the church kept me in line. And he knew even if I wasn't a Christian, I never would cheat in a marriage. I just wouldn't. Didn't change my morals. Even if I didn't believe in God, I wouldn't have cheated. I wouldn't have done anything like that. But he didn't know that, because he would. He cheated in a marriage. You know what I mean? So, one lesson my mom did teach me that was good was, people will always accuse you of or suspect you of things they know they are capable of. So that's the only reason he wanted a Christian wife, was because he thought, well, she'll never cheat on me if I keep her Christian. So
it's amazing too, the whole hell and angels and demons thing you mentioned
Oh my
earlier,
God.
because it puts you in a spot where you feel like you said, where if you kind of open one door, that 7 more are going to come in, and you feel like you got to keep the blinders on, and you got to
Oh my
just stay
God.
focused, head down and stay
I
focused
was
on the Lord.
petrified of the dark. You can ask Stacie when she and her
Wow.
husband would come and stay with us. Brian would go to bed in our house, and we had a huge house. Every light, there's a light on in every room in case I had to get up in the middle of the night to use the washroom or get up and get a drink of water. And he'd go to bed and he's like, there's a light on in every room. And she's like, my mom's afraid of the dark. I wasn't afraid of the dark. I was afraid of demons. But as soon as I let that go, I can watch a horror movie and go to sleep and turn out the light and be in a room by myself now. I have no problem with it whatsoever.
That's awesome. I didn't grow up really heavily exposed to that demonic activity mentality, but as a teenager, I got into the Frank Peretti books.
Oh,
You know
yeah.
that?
Oh,
This Present Darkness.
Yeah, and Pierce in the
Yeah.
Darkness and whatever
yep,
others were. And
yep.
I really, it was kind of like an eye
That was
opener.
reality to us.
Yeah, exactly. And
It was a documentary.
yeah, and I was like aware in some sense that it was part of like the world, but I just felt like that whole idea of like God's protecting angels, your guardian angels, like God's kind of hedging me with protection. But then when I read those books, and I felt like that I think that's probably accurate, that there probably are wars, because you do read about them. You read in Daniel, and other parts and Revelation. They're fighting, and certainly even when you get into Enoch, which is extra biblical. When you get into Enoch and the little bit that's in Genesis, you're like, okay, there's angels that fell, and they came down to the earth and caused all kinds of damage. And once you really think that's going on, oh, it gives you the heebie-jeebies, because you just think
you never think you're in a room alone. It's like there's powers all around you, and you're like, oh.
Yeah. I interviewed one person. Let's mention this real quick. One person was so deep in that, I honestly forget who said this, but they said there were like spirits that would attach themselves to things.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
of course they do. What's wrong with you?
so they couldn't go to a thrift store because they didn't know where it had been.
You couldn't go in a regular store, brand new stuff. Come on, Tim.
I
had never heard that before.
Oh, I believe that for sure. I even lent I had a necklace, but I remember specifically lending my jacket to someone just a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And they went to New York and Montreal, and when they brought it back to me, I think I got a headache after I wore it. And I had a really interesting friend who was a Christian, and I just said, oh, ever since I got my jacket, I don't even know if I said it like that, I don't know, but I said I just been getting a headache. Yeah. And she's like, well, she kind of got me questioning, and I said, yeah, my friend, she took my jacket to New York and blah blah blah. She's like, well, you don't know where she wore it. And I was like, oh yeah, okay. And she's like, we need to pray right now and just break off
the olive oil. We need to anoint it.
We need to break off any kind of spirits that attached itself to where she went wearing your jacket. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, you're probably right. So
what an oppressive system to live under.
It's absolutely oppressive. And even when I was going through infertility, I had my grandmother come over, and she and her husband, I did this when my husband was at hockey, because I just thought he might think this is crazy. It is. Yeah. I had them come over because I was we were desperate, but I was desperate for sure. And I just thought, is there something in our house that's preventing us from getting pregnant? And they came over and walked through our entire home, looking at everything that we owned. And they went into our spare room. And my husband, before we got married, went to Cancun, and he visited the Mayan ruins and brought back like a Mayan calendar tourist artifact, whatever. And they saw it, and they're like, you need to get rid of this right now. And I'm like, okay. So I threw it away, and then we anointed the whole house with oil. I didn't get pregnant. I had an actual medical condition.
Yeah, like it needed surgery.
Yeah. But I had to tell my husband later on, oh, by the way, I threw away like your Mayan calendar because I think there was spirits attached to it, like preventing us from getting pregnant. And he's like,
I'm gonna procreate with this woman.
Yeah.
Treating it
So,
sounds like it was like a Ouija board kind of
oh,
dynamic.
Oh,
totally.
Ouija boards were
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, but
Hmm.
anyway, so yeah, I was always throwing things away in our house, and I just had to tell my husband, sorry, deal with it. He was like, okay, like he just loves me so
He's
much.
so sweet. Oh my
But
God.
I threw
Wow.
away a lot of his things. Just sorry, there's demons. And
Yeah.
he's like, okay.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Well, I would teach him not to buy the expensive version, but I like the cheap version.
the knockoff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. The
So
gold
now
gold
I've
gold
just,
foil
Oh
as
my
opposed to real
God.
gold.
Thank
Yeah.
goodness Michael Kors isn't demonic.
yeah.
Well, Dee, what can I ask you? Just going back a little bit, and this is going to sound like a little bit of a
That's okay.
repetition, but can you tell us some of the things that you would have done privately as a young girl, as a teenager, to just build your relationship with God? Were you doing some
Nothing.
kind of quiet time?
No, you
What? What did I
You
do?
would
What did I
read-
do?
You would read the Bible. No, you did.
Okay. I would read stories.
You would read the Bible.
Okay.
Don't.
As an
you did.
adult, I pretended to read the Bible as an adult. I did. I would bring the Bible out and lay it on the coffee table, or I'd use highlighter to make it
Oh yeah, her
seem
Bible
like.
was really highlighted.
But that's all I did is go through and highlight it. She doesn't know. She doesn't know. Oh my God.
That's a mark of spirituality.
It is.
That's all I would do is highlight it, and I'd use different colors to make it look like I was really doing. I didn't.
We've had some pretty good discussions.
We
in the
have,
last
we
year,
have,
but-
we have. Because she thought I did lots of stuff.
I did.
But all I knew was the stories they talked about in church, which were the same old stories. But honestly, there was stuff in there I'm just learning about as an atheist.
That's true.
That's very true.
Were you like
I
praying all the
really
time?
tried. No, I wasn't.
Okay.
So yeah,
Stacie was a much better Christian. I really hoped I'd get into heaven if there really was one by the skin of my frickin' teeth. And I also hoped that I had lots of notice that I was going to die. I always hoped I would not pray. I always hoped I would not die instantaneously because I had a lot of stuff to get forgiven for before I mean, if I honestly was a Christian, do you think I'd have had premarital sex? I was so proud of you for being such a good Christian. Okay, so yeah, I really, she thinks I was so much better than I was. I watched a lot of sermons so that I could learn stuff because I wasn't reading the Bible like I should. I felt really guilty about it too. I really did. I really felt guilty.
A lot of you always had
I was trying to learn a lot because I didn't have, first of all, the attention span to really read the Bible. I could read other things.
Like we went to a lot of Joyce Meyer conferences.
Yeah, I like Joyce
Oh,
Meyer
gosh.
because I liked Joyce Meyer because she reminded me, she had like a
Calvinist in you,
she had a personality I could really relate to because she's kind of rude and mean.
Yeah.
Like she's not a good Christian, Joyce Meyer. She's not a nice person, really. She pretends to be sometimes, but she's not nice. She even admits it herself. She's not nice.
Well, if you were back then, let me slip into Christian mode for a second.
Yeah.
If you were to die tonight and stand before God and he says, why should I let you into heaven? What would you have said?
Yeah, what would you say?
Like right now, if I was to die tonight?
Like I mean, like back then, if
mode.
someone had said to you,
because your Bible says you'll never leave me or forsake me, so stick to your word, buddy.
But I mean, in terms of being more specific, dealing with the sin issue, just if you were to start with the premise, I've got some bad news for you, but some good news. The bad news is you're born as a child of Adam and Eve, and you have a sin nature that you've inherited, and you also added to it by doing your own sins. And unfortunately, God is so holy, he cannot accept sin. Therefore, you will be punished unless someone else takes your punishment. But I've got some good news. What would you have said? Okay, yeah, I can tell you what the good news is. Here it is. What is the good news?
God, supposedly, he turned himself into human form and came in the form of a baby, grew up sinless, and then died and shed his blood, and then came back to life as a sacrifice. I know. Yeah.
No, just joking.
No. I mean, I know the whole gospel message.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you would have said you're
Yeah.
relying on Christ as your substitute for your sin. He took the
Exactly.
punishment. Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's what I would have said.
Apart from the whole fear of if you died with some
Yeah,
unconfessed sins, it might not,
exactly.
the
Yeah,
magic
yeah,
might
yeah.
not be strong enough.
Exactly. Because how
Mhm.
many times did I recommit? How many times did I say the sinner's prayer? Probably 1,000, because I never thought it actually took, because I doubted it every time.
Hmm.
Like I resaid that thing every time I heard Joel Osteen on the radio on Sirius XM. I said it every single time.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What did the worship music and just the worship part of the services
Nothing. I
mean to you?
hated worship.
Really?
Yeah, I thought
I would show up late so I could skip it, or I'd just sit down and have my head down.
She'd still put her hands up. in the
Sometimes,
air.
yeah, to make it look nice.
What
Yeah.
made you dislike it so much?
It was boring.
Hmm.
And that's one thing that I always, and I'm so glad I've heard other people say this. I thought I was the only person. So many people that have deconstructed said they thought it would be the most boring thing on earth is to go to heaven and just worship God forever. And that
And
was me.
I never thought that. I
Yeah.
was always like so excited to go to heaven. I thought it was the most amazing thing to think about, going and worshiping. And now I'm like, oh yeah, that would get old fast.
Yeah.
But yeah, so since we've deconstructed, like we've had such honest conversations, and I'm like, wow, yeah, we were really different as Christians.
Yeah.
Because I absolutely loved praise and worship. If I didn't get there before it started, I was upset. And because I loved it. It got me like primed for the message. And
Yeah.
I would play worship music all the time in my home.
And I'd play
And-
country.
Yeah. And
There's probably some country Christian, isn't there?
yeah,
Most country,
It's a
they do
little,
mention
like-
God, and sometimes now
Yeah,
it
the
bugs me, but I still, yeah.
yeah, that's like a little gospel.
God and the truck
Yeah.
and the gun.
But
Yeah, and the
they start
whiskey.
out in church just to
Yeah.
to get their career going, and then they veer off.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I know there's times where I'm like, really? Like you did, like, I don't know.
Well, did you fear, Stacie, that she was? Did you ever wonder, is my mom really saved, or did you?
no,
all,
she never. But you did say now you're putting two and two together
Yeah,
with a
there's
lot of
certain
things.
like, I mean, we were always involved, my husband and I, we were always involved with the church. And I did wonder why, like you would come to church with us occasionally. But I was kind of like, why isn't she putting church a little more like front and
Priority.
center and a priority? I did kind of wonder about that. So, and then there were times where I would look back on like my childhood and wonder why we didn't do devotions. But like I wish that I was like, oh, I wish we would have been taught like memory verses every week. But it's not like, yeah, I was raised in a Christian home, I feel for sure. No, I was.
Yeah.
And every time I'd pray with my mom, like I'd ask her to pray, like we prayed together. But the more I reflect on it, I'm like, oh yeah, no, I definitely like was the one to put all this pressure on myself to be a good Christian. My mom wasn't the one to do this. She was brought up a Christian because of her mom. She kind of just raised me like, yeah, we
Just
go
to
to
be a
church.
good person.
Yeah. And I was the type of personality where it's like I was told something, so I just did it. I followed the rules. And if that was like sort of a rule from the time I was a child, like we go to church or Jesus is real, I just did it. I believed it. And if it was like you have to put Jesus first, okay, that's what I'll do. And it was like that was a priority to me.
Hmm.
And it meant everything.
Yeah.
So
But I did try to tell her to loosen up.
yeah, she did, because I was super hard on myself for everything.
Yeah.
Like everything.
Regarding your
Yeah.
walk with Christ.
Yeah,
Regarding
just
everything. She
everything.
made her
Hmm.
own rules and she expected herself to be perfect. I didn't.
Oh,
No.
Matthew, Jesus says, I think in Matthew, be therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect, right? It does
I
say
don't
it.
know. Does it?
Yeah.
No, I didn't. I've never heard that.
Okay.
It was, it's a verse where I think people would, I'm saying it kind of tongue in cheek because I think people would
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
for us, it means more like be mature in your faith.
Yeah.
Even just, aiming for God's perfection as your example, but knowing that we're not going to be
Mhm.
perfect till glory. But
Yeah.
can I ask it? There's something that you're saying that strikes me. It reminds me of something, honestly, and I haven't thought about this in quite a long time. But when I was a kid, it felt like there was a dynamic going on where God was making our family, and this is more probably for Stacie, but God was slowly making our family generationally more and more committed to Him. So, for example, my grandparents, on my dad's side, they're both passed now, but they'd gone through the depression, which had really obviously did a mind job in a lot of people, and their Christianity was very cultural. So they went to a very kind of stoic Lutheran church where you just you went to church, you paid your dues, you stood up a few times, you went, you know, said hello to the pastor on the way out, and you felt good about yourself because you had done church. It wasn't really like you were on fire for the Lord, but you still felt like you'd done the right thing. And so that was like generation one, so to speak, in my mind. And then my parents had gone through some rough stuff, and there had been some divorce, in different parts of the family that they were trying to like tell everybody like stop the divorce, and nobody divorce anymore. Let's keep our family
Yeah.
godly and so forth. And so they were kind of merging, and they went to a Baptist church, and which I kind of grew up thinking was the best thing you could possibly be. But then as I went to Bible college and really studied in depth and got under the wonderful teaching of John MacArthur, and
Oh,
people like that, and Ligonier Ministries and so forth, I
wow.
became a Calvinist, and so I kind of felt like God was saying, generation one was probably Christian. They did bow the knee to me, but they weren't on fire for me. Generation two kind of was like, you're starting to hone the message. You're getting a little bit clearer here. That you
Mhm.
can't just go to church and say you're a good Christian. I want your heart. I want your mind. I want you focused on me. I want to talk to you all day long. Pray without
Mhm.
ceasing. First Thessalonians says. But then it was like generation three, my generation, of course. Everyone thinks their
You were
generation's the one that's going to get it right. Like
Yeah.
you're the ones now. They're going to be a pastor and a missionary. You're going to be a Calvinist. You're going to get fine tune this so well so that when you have your kids and they have their kids, you're now like you're in the hot spot. Like you're right where I want you to be. Did you feel like you were kind of taking what you were given and
did.
making it
Yeah.
even more Christian?
Yep. I think so. Because like okay, so not even just with the Christian part of it, but even just with like purity.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone in my family was pregnant when they got married.
Even her great grandma.
So I was like, well, I'm going to be the first one to wait until I'm married. So I put that pressure on myself,
Mhm.
I think at like 8 years old.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And then I started hearing about it at in church at youth group. So I was like, okay, well, yeah, if that's what we have to do, then that's what I'm gonna do. And so yeah, I kind of just adapted this like, well, I want to do things like
Better.
better. And yeah, I was 8 years old when I made that decision. And not because you said like
No.
you need to do this. So yeah, and then with Christianity, like my grandma was charismatic. I started my journey charismatic, and then on my way out, I became a Calvinist for a couple of years. And I thought,
Praise the Lord.
yeah, praise the Lord.
Yeah. You thought you found the
I
real gospel.
yeah, and I was like, oh my goodness, like I'm so glad that I'm not going to be raising my kids in this like
Crazy
false
church.
Christianity. I'm now like going to raise them in the right church, the right doctrine. So yeah, I totally get what you're saying.
Hmm.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
source of pride too. You feel like I'm part of the solution. I'm moving God's
Yeah,
kingdom forward, especially for future
yeah,
generations.
yeah,
It
definitely. So
puffs you up.
yeah,
Yeah.
and we we both were listening to John MacArthur in the last few years. Um,
Hmm.
so and like Ligonier and everything, because I got my mom into that. Um, the last like as because we both stopped believing in like charismatic Christianity, like the whole prosperity gospel in 2019. Um, and we started listening to more Calvinist preachers because of me. I kind of just, I don't know, did I steer the ship a little? I don't
Oh yeah.
know.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of gave me the final, okay, none of this is real. And
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you that,
Yeah.
remember?
We,
And then I'd seen John MacArthur years ago and didn't like him instantly. He actually reminded me of Mama.
mhm,
His personality I didn't like.
abrasive.
Yeah, I didn't like him. And then I agreed with what he was saying about all the charismatic stuff, but I
Mhm.
still, I mean, and I thought, okay, well, yeah, I liked what he was saying about all that stuff and
Yeah. I
calling
think
him out
that's,
crazy. I agreed with all that, but then I didn't know what to do. It was so confusing.
yeah. We both had a moment um after we stopped believing in the charismatic. Um and I didn't know she had already just kind of was like, I don't believe in any of this because we were not living near each other, so we didn't see each other regularly. Our discussions were mostly over the phone.
Yeah.
But she had already just been like, I don't think any of this is real to herself.
Yeah.
Um, and then I was living, with my family, and I was having that same moment of, I really don't think any of this is real. But um, I had that same fear of hell. And
That
I
was
had a
it.
real strong belief in the devil because I dealt a lot with um, like mental struggles
Anxiety.
and anxiety. And I just equated that to demonic oppression. I didn't actually think, like, I knew some of it could be like clinical, but I also thought a lot of it was demonic. I didn't know enough about it. So I was like, no, I kind of did this like hop in a circle, like, well, no, because if this is real, then this is real. And I came back to the devil, and I thought, well, if I believe in a devil, then there has to be a God. And I believed more in a devil than I did in a God. So I thought, well, I
If
have
there's
to
one, there
believe in
has
a
to be
God.
another.
So I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
like, hey, I guess
I'm
I'm
hooked.
back at square one.
Yeah.
And
That's amazing.
that's where I just landed. I was just kind of like, okay, I give up. I guess
can't do
this is
this.
where I'm at. So then I thought I need to build up my faith because I'm obviously struggling. The devil is clearly just trying to pull me away then. So I need to build my faith. So how do I do that? Well, now I know I need to just continue indoctrinating myself. So I would just listen to more sermons and just keep driving home all of the same stuff with John MacArthur and R.C. Sproul. And, you just keep listening to the same stuff repetitively. And also in that time, we had just started going to a Calvinist church. Our kids were at a Christian school. All my friends at that time were parents from this Christian school. And my mom wasn't living close to me. So I was like, well, what am I going to do? And how am like, I'm going to rip my kids out of the school and disrupt their lives. And I felt like I was at like an impasse. And yeah, so it wasn't until we moved away, and I've probably told a bit of this in my interview, so sorry if I'm repeating myself, but with my mom here, it's
It's
kind of,
okay.
I can tell a bit of her story with it, but it wasn't until we moved away 4 hours from that situation where that's when I just fully deconstructed / deconverted, because it was like a clean slate. I have no friends. My mom was here. We weren't in a church, and it was just like, oh, okay. I
You
think
can
I
literally
can
wash
do
your
this
brain.
now. Yes, I can literally wash my brain and just investigate all these things. So before that, I had just insulated my social circle, myself, my life, and coming somewhere new was just like I could breathe. And I know that that's a lot of how she felt when she moved here a couple months before we did. So
Yeah, my marriage split up, and I just came here and just I tried to talk to my husband, because when she and I discovered together
yeah,
the charismania crap was crap, and I tried to talk to my husband. I a few times I'm like, I really don't think I believe in God at all. He just would shut me down, and I would retreat and go watch Outlander and true crime. And so we were in a at that point about 18-year-old marriage, and we were pretending to be Christian. He didn't even have interest in going to church. I still don't
this is
get
a
that.
different husband than
Yeah,
than the
that
one.
marriage was long over. And he's a really nice man, but he doesn't even crack a Bible. Like, I don't get it. It's people who are Christian in name only. Most Christians are Christian in name only. Okay.
Yeah.
It's just it's a label that they wear because it makes them look like a nice person.
I think that's really true.
So
And I think too, there's a lot of people that would add to that, if they could psychoanalyze themselves enough, that just the fear of what if nihilism really is an accurate way of seeing the world? What if none of this ever matters, never did, never will?
yeah,
And
Yeah.
when you realize it, and I'm definitely a nihilist, but when you realize that, it just feels, if you're used to the Christian worldview where, God's going to take account of every word you speak, every thought you have, every action, everything matters, and everything matters hopefully in a bigger sense where God's going to take the little seeds you planted for the gospel and he's going to blossom them into this wonderful thing and give you crowns of glory. And, like you thought it was just these little efforts and he's going to make it show you this was a really big deal for the kingdom. And so everything matters and it super matters. And then to realize, no, actually, none of it actually matters.
no,
It's just so weird. It feels
is
immoral
weird.
almost, but it weirds you out. And you're like, especially if you have, people that have passed already that you're like, I want to see them again. Like,
That
that's
was
weird to
me
think.
with my grandma. That's the saddest thing for me. And my dog. Isn't that dumb?
No, it
Just my
makes
dog
sense.
and my grandma. I could cry right now, but yeah,
What was your
that was
dog's
the
name?
hardest thing, Bunny.
Hmm.
Yeah, but so yeah, I moved here and then I really started to enjoy my life, and Stacie knows this. So I was really not happy that they were going to move here because I thought I'd have to just start acting again and not be myself. And
Come to church with us.
yeah, I was really not excited that they were going to come here because I had to just put on all this fake crap again. And
Were you in your mind already fully out? You were an atheist?
yeah, I
Okay.
really was. I was just going to my local coffee shops. I had connected with local business people just as a regular here, and kind of going in and getting to know the clientele. And flirting with a few regular guys at the coffee shop and just wasn't dating anybody because my divorce wasn't final yet. And you see, I wouldn't even go out on a date yet because my divorce wasn't final. So I didn't go on my first date until the day after my divorce was final. Stacie was here at that point, but it still didn't change who I was as a person by
Yeah.
not believing in God. But it was just I was just having fun, just not being anybody's
Christian Denise.
yeah, and not really being anybody's mom for a few months and not being anybody's nana for a few months. I was looking after my mom and I was helping with my stepdad who was dying of cancer, and that was a gong show because he was mean when he wasn't healthy, but lung cancer moved to his brain and he just became a monster. But that's a whole other crap show. But
Is
the
it fair to
times
say you didn't have a community to talk to about your lack of belief?
No.
no, because the people that were here was my mom and my mom's friend who's a close friend to me, and she's in her late 70s and she's full on charismatic. But and I love her, but
But if you
yeah,
told her where
no,
you were, it would have freaked him out.
oh yeah, at that point, and she knows now. I just don't talk about it with her. But yeah. So I think basically our whole atheist community is all online, including you. Like we just have our
We have each other
now. And Stacie's got a job now, a part-time job, and I've got a part-time job, and I'm attempting to date here. It's fun. But yeah, we're just introducing ourselves. We've been here almost 2 years. I've been here 2 years now. Stacie's been here almost 2 years. And the people we're getting to know now, when we lived here before, the only way we had community was in church. And we've kind of kept to ourselves because this is a real Bible Belt here. And
super conservative.
yeah. But I went and got a job at a tiny little pizza bar. I'm slinging draft beer and making pizzas, and I like it a lot. And yeah, we're, like I said, Stacie's developing a real online presence, and I'm really proud of her. She's really coming into her own. So anyways, where was I in my story?
Well, you were talking about when they were about to move, you were kind of afraid that you'd have to put on a show.
Yeah, because she was asking me to check out a few churches, and I did. And at that time, COVID was still kind of in full swing, and you had to meet underground. So literally went to a church in a barn where they were hiding. Bunch of freaks. And but I did it because I think it was a Reformed Baptist.
It was a Reformed Baptist church. Yeah.
So
it was like really far away, and it was like down a dirt road into
no bathroom.
Barn, and
well, no one can check if you're wearing your mask if you're that
exactly.
That's right.
And the vaccine passports hadn't been implemented yet.
We lost our light.
Hadn't been implemented yet.
We're sharing a headphone. Hold on.
Yeah, okay. But they were getting ready for basically like the government like just taking over and the apocalypse. So,
it was anyway, they were nice enough people, but they're weird. So I wasn't, and I would have just had to not go. I would have gone the first couple Sundays just till they got settled somewhere, and I would have stopped going.
She kind of like, she found really sweet ways of not attending that I just thought were like, wow, you're so selfless. Because we had our little guy was like 2 at the time, and before that, like just before 2. And when we were at our Calvinist church in Vancouver, they didn't have kids church or nursery or anything. So he would just kind of like run wild, and we would be up and like chasing him around or just walking him around the parking lot. And so one day after church, she's like, I think I'm gonna stay home with Luke so you guys can just go and enjoy church. And I was like, really? Are you sure? Like you're gonna, she's like, no, you guys need to just go. I'll stay home with him. He's too young to just get any of this. Anyway, I was like, wow. So she'd stay home on Sunday mornings with Luke and look after him. And then we'd come home and have like she'd have lunch ready for us. And now, so since we've deconstructed, I'm like, hey, you just didn't want to like go to church. And
Well, I do like
That's
cooking
awesome.
tell
yeah,
and looking after.
I know. And oh, well, she
Yeah.
loves Luke.
Yeah.
But it
That's
was a
awesome.
kind of like a way for her to just
Not be the
not
church.
be there.
It worked
So,
out for both of us. So
yeah, it was just kind of funny.
Um,
Just little funny things that
yeah.
we've been like
remember when?
remembering.
Yeah.
So, but I feel like I know that in Jehovah's Witnesses, there's a term called PMO.
Yeah.
So physically in, mentally out. And when I heard that term, I'm like, okay, that was definitely my mom.
Yeah.
She was physically
Almost
in,
my whole life.
mentally out, and just sort of had to keep up this facade. And
We haven't really touched a lot about
Yeah.
on my mom, but my mom, wherever we went to church, my mom was a frickin' bulldozer. She would make herself known from the first Sunday she started anywhere. Super strong personality, and she became known as the prophetess. So she had a word for everybody and their dog.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So you were always in her shadow, and it became known, oh, you're Patricia's daughter. Okay. So you just kind of hovered in her shadow, and people just always assumed you were super Christian because you were her daughter. So
Yeah.
you
You're
just,
by osmosis, you're getting the vibes.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So people just assumed I was super Christian, and there was no way around that ever. There's just no way around it. I guess I would liken it to being the younger brother of the football star in high school. People just assumed, oh, you must be a great athlete too. And if you weren't, it would suck for you, right?
Yeah.
So,
Can I ask with I know you're getting to this part of the story where you're eventually able to share with each other where you're both at, but when you're still kind of keeping it to yourself, Dee, that you're, you left Christianity, how are you processing things like the afterlife and the loss of the afterlife, but also just generic religious trauma, realizing that, while Stacie and her husband were still in it and kind of, receiving these messages and confirming it to themselves, that you were not just out, but I would assume you were kind of becoming aware that there were some really bad things that this had done to you. Like, how are you starting
okay,
to heal?
I'll be honest with you. I think Stacie's dealt with religious trauma more than I have. I grew up with a very traumatic childhood, sexual abuse, physical abuse that carried over into my adulthood that I ended up in my second marriage. Okay, my first marriage was to Stacie and my son's father. That was about 8 years. And due to abuse in my childhood, that marriage was not great. Neither one of us really knew how to love or be loved. So he left about 8 years in. We were too young. I was 17 when I married him. He wasn't an evil guy, nor was I evil to him. We were just too young, and we were pretty much forced to get married because I was pregnant. And again, my mom, with her strong personality, just started planning a wedding. And he was scared of her. I was scared of her. And then I lost that baby. He was stillborn. And we were kind of just standing there in the rubble going, okay, well, I guess we're married. And we went on to have 2 kids. And then when they were really little, he's just like, I don't want to be married. And I'm not really into this. So whatever, it is what it is. Like I said, he wasn't evil. He just wasn't prepared for marriage or being a dad. And I was prepared to be a mom. I was just prepared for that from a young age because I was the eldest of a single mom with 3 kids. So I was thrown into the role of mother very early with my siblings. So then I ended up in a second marriage that was very abusive. I was very, very wounded. And when I got out of that, I got married way too quickly to my third husband, who was he was a caretaker. He wanted to take care of us. He saw a need that he wanted to fill. He was just a caretaker. And he and I were like best friends. We lived 19 years as best friends. And so that was a time for healing. So I healed from my childhood and my second marriage during that time. And there was it was not an intimate marriage at all in every sense of the word, even what you're thinking. There was no intimacy, but we are still friends to this day. And
You've been through quite a journey, just
Oh.
even on that part of life.
Yeah. So, and that husband is the kindest man. Stacie still calls him Papa. He did everything a father should do for my kids. And he's also a survivor of the residential schools here in Canada. I don't know if you know much about that, but they were taken away from their parents and forced to give up their culture, the Native children, First Nations. And so he had a lot of healing to do. And we kind of just healed together. So my trauma did not come from the church. My trauma came from a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I was doing my best to be a mom and a good wife to my third husband, who was dealing with his own trauma. And here we are.
How are you dealing with the afterlife and just the loss of your worldview? Was it like a switch where you're just like, I'm just done with it, I don't need to spend any more time on it, or were you
I'm still mourning my grandmother.
Okay.
That's the one thing at night when I close I'm gonna cry right now. That's the one thing. Because my mom was only 17 when she had me, and she didn't really know how to look after a baby. Okay. So my grandma was the one I bonded with as a mom. And I always thought I'd see her again. She died when I was 18. So that was the only thing.
Yeah, it's so hard when you realize the ramifications of losing the worldview.
She's the only thing I miss.
I've thought a lot about whether or not, like, if I would feel differently at all if I had someone like that, or especially like a child that had died. I'm very glad I haven't had that, but I definitely can at least empathize with people feeling like that can't be it. Like there's got to be more, and it's so hard to deal with it, even just for your own existence, let alone the people that you love. To think there's got to be more to this, and it's a hard thing to deal with. I think it's one of the things too that a lot of us, I think, don't get a chance to really grieve when people pass, because we're like, oh, they're not really gone, because we're going to see them again in a few years, and it's a blink of an eye. So don't let it really get you down. You'll see them again soon. And then when it hits you later, like, no, that was it. It's like you need to re-grieve. Like that was it.
Yeah. I think for me, like I grieved the idea of heaven. I was like, oh, there is no heaven. And then it was like a couple of weeks later, it hit me that when or if I lose a child, hopefully that happens after I pass away. But if, say, something were to happen to my kids or my husband or even my mom, that's it. And I think it just really hit me like a ton of bricks And it scared me because all this time, obviously the thought of losing someone you love is really scary and terrifying. But you have that assurance as a Christian, oh, you'll see them again, you'll be reunited for eternity. So then losing that worldview, you really take the time you have with them here as like extra precious, and it felt so much more fragile once I lost that belief. And not that I would want to believe again just for that
No.
false sense of security, but
Right.
every so often that hits me more of, oh my gosh, like your life is so fragile. So
Even
yeah.
And I was
so,
good.
even so, my mother's nonchalantness about everyone who ever died used to fucking piss me off, because someone would die and it's okay, they're in heaven.
Yeah.
And even people who I knew weren't Christian, she would say, well, you don't know what they said the moment before they died.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I would kind of like minimize your feelings of grief.
Exactly.
Like, you don't need to be upset. And it was like, no, but we still have feelings, and I still
She
miss them.
never allowed us to grieve.
Yeah.
And then she lost her husband last January, and all of a sudden it was okay for her to grieve.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It just,
On a
yeah.
related note to it, it amazes me that a lot of Christians do end up basically betraying that they don't really believe it, at least on an emotional level, because there are a lot of Christians who would fall as well into a category where when someone dies like prematurely, that it's such a travesty if someone dies in their teenage years or young adulthood or whatever,
Yeah.
that it's like you expect them to be to achieve old age, and you expected the children to outlive their parents. And when you get someone that dies at age 20 or something, it becomes this like continual travesty and awfulness, even for the Christians.
Yeah.
And they, they might claim, oh, I'm just remembering them. But in reality, like I like to step back sometimes and just think, like, let's really get back into Christian mode. If you really think, like, really truly think that this is a blink of an eye, this life, and eternity is forever and ever and ever, and that they were experiencing the normal pains of life, but now they're just completely pain free. They'll never have pain again. They're dancing with joy before the Lord nonstop. And everything that they've ever could possibly dream has come true and more. This is the best possible news in the world. There's no way to see it as a travesty and a
Yeah.
horrible situation. There's just none.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet they're like constantly grieving. Oh, we can't
Yeah.
believe this happened. It's like, what do you mean? If you believe in God's sovereignty and you believe in heaven, this is nothing but someone's death in the Lord is a party, absolutely a party. And but they don't live that way. And it's like, do you really believe this stuff?
Yeah.
Hmm.
No, I agree.
No, everything's bent
Yeah.
and twisted, and yeah, no, it's all
Be-
crap.
Speaking of bent and twisted, I was going to mention something. We were talking about Calvinism, that it's actually something that I used to agree with this mentality, and so I say this to my shame. So this is going to sound horrifying, but right before my deconversion, I was going to a church here, a Presbyterian church here in Atlanta, near Atlanta, called Perimeter Church. There's a circle road around Atlanta, and that's called the Perimeter. And the church was originally right there, so it was called Perimeter Church. It moved, but kept the name. But the pastor who founded it, his name is Randy Pope, which is ironic, but it's not Catholic. But Randy Pope was preaching. He had founded the church, like everyone knew him because he was just from the first day, and he was talking through something, and he got somehow on the topic of our inherent sin nature. And he was talking about how a lot of people in the church were apparently surprised that they were a Calvinistic church. He's like, I hope you all understand we're Calvinist, right? And he said, I think some of you have been coming, and because we're so big and we're kind of seeker sensitive, you think we're kind of like progressive or something. He's like, we're a conservative Calvinist church. We always have been, we always will be. And he went on to talk about how he used this example where he said, I want to, explain how this relates to real life. And he said, a lady came to me, her baby had died like at age 1 or 2, horrible situation. And he said, this mom was just really, she was coming to me for counseling as a pastor and trying to come to grips with the fact that she'd lost her small child. And the grief was just overwhelming her. And he said, the one thing that made a difference, in his opinion, to her, that helped her actually start to cement, get some kind of foundation for how to process the death of a small child, was, he said, ma'am, you got to understand this theologically. Your baby deserved to die.
Oh my
Like,
God.
all of us are born deserving to die. Your baby was not an exception. And he painted it as if it somehow helped her to theologically, put it in the right category and start to heal from it. But I just thought, what a mind job when we're talking about afterlife and Calvinism. Like, what a mind job to think this little baby deserves to die. It just blew my mind. But what I say to my shame is, at that time, I would have said that sounds really harsh, but I actually agree with you. The Bible does teach that. And so it wasn't part of my deconversion per se. It may have been a small seed behind the scenes, who knows? But, my journey was a little different. It took the comparative mythology side to deconvert me.
Yeah.
But looking back, I'm like, this stuff, this theology stuff really messes with you, both in terms of the afterlife and seeing, what you think of when other people die. Just messes with you.
Yeah.
That-
Wow. Oh,
But
cringeworthy.
But
Yeah.
I understand that Calvinist mentality of, well, we're all born sinners from the moment of conception.
Yep.
There's nothing you can do about it. It's just in you, and it's disgusting.
Yeah.
Oh,
And it's so freeing too to think that we can raise our kids without that stuff. And
definitely.
we're
So
night and
from the
day.
minute we're born, we deserve to die. But while we're in the womb,
Yeah.
don't kill it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. Well, going back to your story, I do want to ask, what was the kind of the first conversation or two like when you all finally both got on the same page and kind of said, I think we're
Coffee.
both done.
Oh,
It
well,
involved coffee.
well,
That's good.
that
It's a
was
good
the
start.
first one, but there were like little.
We have to go by her memory now because mine kind of really sucked.
It was like there were little. I was dropping these little like.
Oh yeah,
What?
truck
Oh,
or the
yeah,
car. But
yeah,
go ahead,
yeah.
you do it now.
Okay, but no, there were like. I was really starting to question and have doubts, and I kind of knew I was done, but I was afraid to sort of.
I do remember one thing.
What?
Okay. Every year or so, she would go through this. And I remember specifically, I think it was in the kitchen. You're like, okay, I'm starting to have these doubts, but don't worry. I go through this about every year or so. And I always come back. And I went, okay, whatever.
I was just saying that, hoping that it would sort of like
Lay the groundwork.
kick something back into me to like jumpstart my faith again, like jump starting a car. Like, okay, if I say this, it'll just reignite my faith. But it didn't. But yeah, I was sort of saying these little things, and every time she'd come over, I'd be like, I really don't understand why it's so hard for these. Like, there's so many smart preachers.
Yeah.
Like, I used the example at the time of R.C. Sproul and John MacArthur. I said, why is it that they are both, I thought, like super smart theologians, and why can they not agree on baptism? That should be such an easy thing to see like agreement on. Why is it that the Bible,
eschatology, you
and
said too.
and eschatology too, and because their eschatology is different. I'm like, why is the Bible so unclear? How can they read the same Bible and their friends, but they have two completely different interpretations? That was starting to really bother me, because I just thought this should be clear.
And I was just like, meh.
Yeah. But she didn't say meh to me.
I was just like, I didn't care.
And I was just trying to like work these things out, and inside I just remember like my brain was going on overdrive, and I was also feeling the guilt of like, this just doesn't make sense. This just doesn't make sense. And I was secretly like looking at, it sounds like I was secretly looking at porn or something, but I was like secretly looking at like deconstruction pages on
Are you?
Instagram. Oh yeah.
Gosh, that's awesome.
And I even like I went on Reddit, and I went to the ex-Christian Reddit sub forum, and my heart was just pounding out of my
Aw.
chest. Like it gave me like a nauseated feeling that I thought, oh, this is so bad. This is so bad. I should not be doing this. And I clicked on it to join, and then I read through like 10 different threads, and I'm like, holy crow, like everything these people are saying is making sense. It's logical. I don't disagree with anything that these ex-Christians are saying. Why am I agreeing with them? And I just like, I quickly skimmed it, and I was like, okay, I got to get out of here. And I closed it, and I was like, I can't read this. Oh my gosh, like this is really doing something to me. And I was terrified.
Sounds like a peep show.
I know. So then I messaged a friend on Instagram who I knew was an atheist. And I said, yeah, I'm really questioning everything. I don't think I believe anymore. And he's like, what? And I'm like, I haven't told anybody. Okay, I gotta go. Bye. And and then, but it just felt very like I had to just tell someone. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell my husband. It was just this random person I don't know online. And then we went away on a ski trip, and it was all just like snowballing and snowballing and coming to a head. And I was just like, I have to tell my husband. One, I just need to see how it feels. And so I told my husband, I don't think I believe in God. I know I told this on my interview with you because I've watched it, and I just wanted to see how it felt. And I did not get this overwhelming conviction of, oh, that was horrible. I'm going to hell. I got this like, oh, finally, I'm being truthful. Finally, it's like I'm actually saying what I've been fighting with myself for the last few months. And my husband isn't going, Stacie, why would you say that? He just said, okay, I don't think you're wrong. And I was like, really? And he just said, yeah, like, I don't think you're wrong. Just take this very slowly, because this was my entire identity, and he didn't want me to crumble and like panic and all of a sudden be like, wait, what did I just do? Okay, no, I want to go back. I need to go to church. No, scratch that. So it was 2 days later, we came back from the ski vacation, and I was so excited to tell my mom, because I tell my mom everything. And I didn't quite know where she was at spiritually, although I kind of had a feeling she wasn't going to be surprised. And so I just said, I need to talk to you. And she said, okay, let's go out for coffee tomorrow morning. And I was like, okay, yes, let's go out for coffee. So she's like, okay, what do you need to talk to me about? And I'm like, so I kind of fumbled over my words, and she's like, okay, just tell me what you're trying to say. Cause she's like, it's me. And I'm like, okay, so I I don't think I believe in God. She's like, okay. And I'm like, that's it? She's like, yeah. So are you like an atheist or something? And I was like, oh, I don't know about that. Because that word was really like scary. I was like, I don't know. Even though inside I was like, yes, I want to say that. And she's like, why are you agnostic? And I'm like, I don't know. I just know I don't believe in God. And that's all I know right now. And we had like a really great conversation. And she's like, cool, well, that's great, because I haven't really believed in a long time. And I'm like, you haven't?
Hmm.
She's like, no. I'm like for how long? She's like, for a really long time.
Did you
So,
feel like you wish she had told you, or were you fine with the fact that it was
you
kind of
know,
quiet?
like I kind of, yes and no.
I think you'd have freaked out.
I think I would have, because
She'd have been scared I'd have gone to hell.
yeah,
And
Hmm.
because yeah, and also here's the thing. Okay, everyone thinks we are the exact same person.
oh yes, this is true.
People think that when she does something, I just follow along. And it kind of bugs us
Yeah, a lot.
a lot. That like we're just very similar. We're very similar. And if she would have said I'm no longer a Christian, it probably would have like influenced me to be like, oh, well, how come? And then I probably would have I would have been scared, but then I would have investigated, because I just like investigating things. Like if I found out a friend is Jehovah's Witness, I would have investigated Jehovah's Witness, not because I wanted to become that. I just would have been fascinated with their beliefs, right?
Yeah.
So um if she would have said that, I would have found out more, and then it probably would have led to my own deconstruction.
But people would have thought she did it because of me.
Exactly.
Mm.
So another thing my husband said to me was, he goes, the really cool thing about your whole deconversion is, he goes, I know, not that he didn't like believe it was authentic, but he said the cool thing about it is you came to all of this completely on your own. It's not like you've been hanging out with someone who's a non-Christian and they've influenced you. He's like, this was all you. And I really liked that, because it really was like, it just was my one thing led to another, led to another, led to another. And I just was like, yeah, no, this is all bull.
Hmm.
And so
That's so cool.
if she would have said to me 3 years ago, hey, I don't believe in any of this anymore, I'm done, I'm out, I probably would have followed her, not like followed along like a little duck or anything, but I would have been like, okay, well, why? And then it would have influenced me for sure.
Hmm.
So I'm glad that she didn't, because
That's so true.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
everyone thinks she doesn't think for herself. Honestly.
But we're
And
just
she's a lot
very
smarter
alike.
than I am. Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm glad that it just kind of came this way. And I'm the one, because like you said earlier, I was the more devout Christian. So the fact that the more devout Christian out of the two of us was like, hey, I don't believe in any of this. And then she's like, oh, me too.
I'm
Like,
like,
finally.
finally.
She's like, oh, finally, I can be
Mm.
honest.
Mhm.
I think it is really cool that that's how the story.
It happened the way it was supposed to happen.
Yeah, like it just, I
Mm.
think
Yeah.
it's really neat.
I love too that you all had each other as support, because so many people, as you know, sure you
Yeah.
know, with being plugged in the community like I am, you know, there are a lot of people that talk about how they just don't have anybody that, apart from the
Yeah.
online community, that they can really find support with. And a lot of people get really punished, you know, in different ways. Some people it's just
Oh, we know.
like individuals, but sometimes it's your whole community, like to the JWs, you know, they're just gonna cut you off and shun you,
Yeah.
and it really breaks your heart. And it's so, I think it's such a different journey if you can find somebody close. And I think as far as I know, most 99.9% of the people in my world that I've grown to call a community or have been online.
Yeah.
And it would definitely be, I've since found local people, you know, over the years, but it's taken a while. And
Yeah.
I've actually recently created a Facebook group for people, for atheist parents who are local, like right here in my area, to
Oh,
say, you know,
wow.
when you all are at the park or the mall, you know, hanging out with your kids, you know, if you want to invite other families, let's do it. And so we can get to know each other. you
Oh,
know, so there's
good.
ways where, you know, some of those kind of things, I'm sure a lot of people are doing that, you know, trying to start to connect to each other locally, but it's hard. It's very hard to go through it alone. And I think especially if you get someone close to you, whether it's a parent or a spouse who is like if you do this, like you're basically a traitor, like a profound, you're a traitor to the Lord, you're a traitor to our family. And you get those
Yeah.
messages and you know, pile on, we're gonna punish you in different ways. It's like, oh my gosh, like this, you to borrow the biblical phrase, like you really better count the cost. This is gonna hurt a lot. And if you, especially if you are vocal, I know some people will deconvert very quietly. And for some people that's very necessary. And I totally get it. I felt the need myself to create a platform pretty quickly to talk about it, to help other people. And I felt like I had some things in my background that would enable a platform if it grew, which it thankfully is. Um, that if it grew, that I had a voice where some people actually heard me, that I could actually probably help some of those people through some of the journeys that I've been through and things I've learned, especially with the things I'm going to be doing more eventually in the next year or two with mythology, comparative mythology, in the book of Enoch and all that. But just realizing that so many people, the pain that they're going through is intense. And I like to use this analogy, and then I want to hear your thoughts on this. But my physical father had died in January of 2019, and I deconverted in the end of September of 2019. He and I weren't that close over the years, but you know, I went to his funeral, of course, in Pennsylvania, and you know, gave my regards and so forth, and then came back here to Georgia. But it struck me as I began to see the reaction of Christians later that year to my deconversion, that just like you would, if you lose a father, you'd expect everyone to say, "We're so sorry for your loss," you know, and they would encourage you to in your grief. But nobody would ever come to your funeral of you grieving your father and say, "You're an idiot. How, you know, what are you doing? This is so stupid, and you're a traitor." Like they were like, you know, grieve, take your time, and realizing that Christians would be looking at you as an atheist, and you're grieving arguably a much more important father, the heavenly father, the father, you know, you expected your earthly father to be with you for 30, 40 years. You expected your heavenly father forever and ever and ever. That God just in your mind kind of died. And you're now grieving it and having a funeral. And they're kind of saying, you're an idiot and you're a traitor and stop the funeral because it's not real. And it's like, they really severely disrespect your ability to just grieve your deconversion. And it's not like we're like you've joked before, Stacie, we're not here trying to sin. Like we really wanted this to be real, and we really thought it was. Like we're truly grieving.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Yeah.
wow.
That's profound.
Yeah.
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 Because I always thought I would be a Christian forever because I was so in love with just
All of it.
Jesus and all of it. And I would have given my life for it all at that time. Like that's how much I believed. And so it still just makes me so, I get offended when people say, "Oh, you were never a real Christian then." And it's just like, oh, it's like they're taking a part of me
Yeah.
and stomping on it because it's like you don't actually know you don't know me
Well,
in
it's
that
like getting a
way.
divorce and saying you were never really married.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
you don't know that commitment and yeah, and you don't know the feeling of the loss once you stop. And it's not like you're choosing to stop believing either. It's once you see that there is no evidence for that belief anymore, it's just like a light switch goes off, and it's not like all of a sudden you're like, okay, I am no longer choosing to believe this. It's just like, oh my goodness, this isn't real.
yeah.
And
And you can't unsee it.
I was just going to
choose
say
it.
that.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that.
I can
Why would
remember,
you?
I can remember the moment. I listened to a lot of YouTube videos and just like educational things, not just people's little, like conspiracy type videos that people put together, but like educational materials. And I was putting my makeup on in the bathroom, and it was the story of Moses, or not
Noah.
Moses, sorry, Noah's Ark. Someone else said Moses the other day on the live stream, but Noah, and that being in older mythologies. And it was that moment I was putting my makeup on, and I was like, oh my gosh, if that is in other mythologies and it's in the Bible, and that's not a true story to just the Bible, that means that it's a lie. And then this is not real, because then if there's one lie in the Bible, then the whole thing is set up to be untrue, or at least I can't trust it.
Yeah.
Not infallible.
It's not infallible. And so it was just like, boom, it was done for me. And I didn't, and then from there I was like, okay, now I want to know more.
Yeah.
But it was that moment that was just, it just, my faith just was like, poof, gone.
How do you all deal with if you ever have a Christian try to proselytize to you these days? Like if someone says, I really want to have a conversation with you about the Bible, and you can tell they're not
We
trying
just smile
to.
and nod. We're not rude.
Yeah, we had someone approach us at a
Gelato
place, and she was very sweet. We haven't really had a lot of that.
She was kind of like the people we were talking
Very
about in church, kind of simple.
And she was just kind of like chatting with my little boy and wanting to teach him like a card game, and then she came over and showed us some of the little, like, she made these bookmarks and stuff, and I kind of was like, oh, I wonder if these bookmarks have like Bible verses on them. And sure,
They did. Yeah.
Then she started telling us her testimony of God healing her from leukemia at a young age, and just that Jesus loves us so much. And my mom and I just kind of looked at each other like, okay,
Been here, done this.
Yeah. And she was just, like I said, she was a very simple person. We weren't gonna just
We're not
start
rude.
debating her,
No.
or saying like, this is all like, you're believing a bunch of crap, lady. Like, we just were like, okay, thank you very much. And just smiled. And I didn't want to be rude.
No.
If it was somebody who seemed a bit more aggressive, I probably would be like, okay, no, goodbye.
Yeah.
Like,
take your shit and go.
That's enough. Fortunately, we haven't come across that.
No.
Yet. And I think it would definitely depend on the person and their how they're talking.
We just don't put ourselves in those kind of positions.
Yeah. And go ahead.
I was saying, I feel like in some ways, like I think one of you said the idea of I've been there, done that. And I think in some ways it does feel like that to me too, where it's like, I've already given enough time to this.
Yeah.
And I understand that some people feel like it deserves more and more of an audience because to them it's real. But it gets to a point where it's like, and people have asked me, like, why don't I spend more of my time on this platform debating? I'm like, I'm not trying to give that audience much more of an, like I do it sometimes, but it's mostly honestly for, I hate to say it, but it's for snark. I want them to dig the hole a little deeper. Like, tell us some more about why your God loves blood. Tell us more about why God likes to cut off little boys' penises. Like, come on, like, tell us more about it. And it's just like, you're making this, you're not making this better. You're making it worse for yourself. Like, this is really stupid stuff. Tell us why we should pretend to eat somebody's flesh and drink their blood every Sunday.
Yeah.
And it's like, but in general, like, I don't want them to feel like it's an option anymore. Like, I'm not here to debate. Like, the conversation's kind of over. Like, not in a mean sense. Like, obviously, if you're just saying hello in the grocery store or something, but like, and I think there's a part of me though that the point of my saying that is, I think there's a part of us that really needs to help send the message pretty clearly to other people in the community, because some people reach out to me on a pretty regular basis. Some of them saying, I'm still struggling so much with this. What if the resurrection was real? And what if this is true? And and they're still really on the fence because these things have roots that are so deep in us. And I think we need to kind of send the clear message, like, we're not really debating Christian. I mean, there are channels that do it, but by and large, for a lot of us, the best thing we could do is tell people the debate's long since over.
Yeah.
Those people are people that literally lost the debate. They just want to keep on reigniting the fires that have long since gone out. And it doesn't get better just because we keep rehashing it. Like it's just the same old stuff. And to say, let's say then, now that we know that that's over, what should we be talking about? Maybe that's a good segue to my next question is, what is life like as an atheist? What is your morality like? How do you, being possibly a nihilist, how do you find, meaning and purpose? What do you do to, someone asked me a question the other day, how would you define what's sacred in your life if you'd use that term? But, how would you say your life is better, and what is your life all about? Not because someone told you how it has to be, but just what are you choosing to make it all about?
Happiness. I'm spending wonderful time with my grandchildren. I'm choosing to do things that make myself happy for the first time, and I don't feel selfish.
Yeah.
Because we're told not to put ourselves first when you're a Christian, right? Die to self. So being happy doesn't feel like a sin. And if I want to actually choose to do something to make myself happy, I'll do that. And by making myself happy, I think I'm a better grandmother. I think I'm a better mother. I'm a better daughter to a mother who I had been extremely angry with. I don't know. I think I'm happier. I think I think I'm nicer as an atheist than I was as a Christian. I'm more forgiving as an atheist than I was as a Christian. Isn't that ironic?
Crazy.
It's nice not to have to always feel like you have an issue you have to take a stand for. You don't always have to be ticked off about something. It's like, who cares?
Isn't it nice too to not like try to constantly think, is that person saved? Do I need to witness to him?
I never witnessed.
Yeah, but you always felt that you didn't witness, but you always felt like you had to be an example for guys.
That's true.
She had that, like, I remember we would have certain people come in our life and come and stay with us, and she would be like, oh, I really hope that we like if they didn't leave saved, she was just like, oh, what, because
I wouldn't witness. I was scared to witness, and if someone died, I'd be like, crap, I was too scared to.
No, but even they die, but I'm thinking of like someone in particular, and you were worried that they didn't, because we would bring them to church or something, and if they didn't say if they didn't say the Lord's Prayer, she's like, oh,
the sinner's prayer,
or the sinner's prayer. We didn't do a good enough job. So you actually felt a lot of pressure of just walking the walk and talking the talk. And
that's true.
And just being an example of a Christian.
I was never comfortable sharing the gospel. I just thought, I'll live by example, but I'm not going to preach. And if someone wants to know, a lot of times, all the time, everywhere I would go, people would say, and this is true, and it's still true, actually. So it has nothing to do with God, because people would say, when you walk in, the place lights up. Everywhere I go, people say, man, when you walk in here, you glow. Like it just you light up the room when you walk in. So has nothing to do with God. And
she's just super
fun. So I just thought, well, if people want to know what it is, they can ask me, and then I'll say, well, I'm a Christian. And if they wanted to know more, I would tell them. If they didn't, I wouldn't. I was never that person.
Mm. But you're still trying to shine the
Yeah.
light of Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I always felt guilty because I mean, the only person I felt I ever led to the Lord was the person that we took to Joyce Meyer.
Oh, yeah.
And then she just continued to live her life as she wanted to when she wasn't around us. When she was with us, she was a Christian. When she wasn't, she wasn't. I mean, she continued to do her thing and whatever, but as we did, like as I did, I know.
Oh, yeah.
But you were
I
still
think-
super Christian.
I think if there were a hell for me, it'd be partially just having to listen to her preach all day long. That'd be my personal hell.
Yeah.
But all
Yeah.
she does is tell stories. She's not, I'm sorry, but Joyce Meyer, I would not consider her an act. She's a,
We stopped considering her.
Yeah.
When we became Calvinists.
well, I
so-
didn't become a
Yeah.
Calvinist,
Okay,
but I
I
just
did.
always considered her,
That's lucky.
well, I considered her like, she just told stories and she made me laugh.
Hmm.
Like a motivation.
That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I like her stories because she's just, I don't know, she tells it like it is. Like, tell people to be polite. Tell people to, put their shopping carts back. Don't just leave them in the parking lot. I'm like, yeah, preach it. Yeah,
This
Jesus
social-
said to do.
social gospel.
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
On the
So
most
whatever.
basic
And
level.
also,
That's crazy.
it just gave me an excuse to whip out the American Express card and go to St. Louis once in a while, or, like, I don't know, I don't know.
Well, can I ask in terms of
Yeah.
just looking forward to the rest of your lives, what would you say is your greatest hope and goal for raising the next generation and passing on the baton in a different and better way? Like what are the passions of your heart for raising kids without toxicity from religious trauma?
Exactly that. No toxicity,
just-
no.
Yeah. I mean,
Like how would that flesh out? And
We're just trying to make sure Luke lives to 21.
this is my 4-year-old.
Oh my God, this child.
Crazy.
is he a daredevil?
He's fun.
He is,
He is, but he is very caring and kind. And from the time he could say words, it's like, I don't want to pray.
Yeah.
Don't pray with me.
he was
I don't want to hear
definitely-
about that. We're like, okay, good. He's literally a cradle atheist, which
Yeah.
is awesome. No, but he seriously walks the wild side, but he reminds me of my son, Stacy's brother, which is cool. So I know how to deal with him. I know how to relate to him.
Yeah.
He's a pretty cool kid.
But yeah, I think because my older two, they're 11 and 8. And so they had the most exposure to Christianity with going to church, being in Christian school. So they saw this deconversion, like what's happening? My oldest would see all the books I was bringing home and asking me, Mommy, what's an atheist? And I was like, just go Google it. Like I was
Actually, the first thing she said, it's just a word,
yeah.
and then threw the book.
I just said it's just a word. Because I didn't wanna freak him out, because I knew when I was his age, if my mom was reading the books that I was reading, and I was the way I was at 10 years old, it would have really shook me and affected me, and
Yeah.
it would have really
You'd have had a nervous
I would have
breakdown.
had a nervous breakdown.
She
So
would have.
I didn't really know where Zachary was at in his faith. I knew he kind of had a belief, but I didn't want to make my new lack of belief something that he had to take on. So we just kind of phased it out, and as they started asking more questions, we answered them, but it did take a few months. And they're very inquisitive, and now I just told them, hey, you know what? I believed a lot of things that I now think are not true. And I also told you a lot of things that I now think are not true. And if you ever come across information that you want to share with me, feel free to do so, because I don't know everything that I thought I was right about. And you can teach me things, because that's the way the world works. So I want them to feel like, they can come with new information and teach.
That can be really smart.
Yeah. he's
That's
my
awesome.
oldest. Yeah. And Harrison is just, he's a real sweetie pie.
Innocent,
He's just,
kind,
yeah.
generous, amazing. He sees the world through rose-colored
Yeah.
glasses.
And
Mm.
so he was the one who kept wanting to pray the longest, just every night as more of like a ritual thing. So we continued doing that until it phased out, because we didn't want to, again, like shake his just
Core.
core. And now we just, they know about the shows that I do. We talk about these things. They know that I don't believe in God, and but I told them, you guys can decide for yourself. But they're like, no, I don't think it's real. My oldest said, Mummy, there are no talking snakes. That's what he said to me. So
That's awesome.
yeah, so I just really want them to know that, like, I tell them it's okay to question even the adults, even the teachers. Like, you can ask questions. Just because someone tells you something doesn't mean that they're 100%
That's
correct.
right.
Yeah.
So find out on your own, fact check things.
Question
Even what
authority.
I tell you doesn't mean that I have it all right. I just have been reinforcing that, because before I would say, oh no, this is right, this is wrong, end of story.
Yeah. Black and white.
Yeah. And so now I'm just like, nope, you're free to discover whatever you want to discover, and you're free to teach me things, and I'm open to it. So that's how I want them to be raised. And that's basically how my husband has always been. I just sort of
I love it. I love it. I
He's
love
such
to
a cool guy.
yeah.
I love the idea too, just of how you're describing something that I would use with the word thought autonomy, but letting people have their own thoughts, kind of like we talk
Yeah.
about body autonomy, but thought autonomy,
Yes.
and the lack of information that we felt like we dealt with, but saying, there's more information out there, you can have it all and then make a good
Yeah.
decision. I do think just the existence of an atheist is such, like in your close circle of friends, is such a big deal too, because I don't think I ever really thought about atheism or atheists when I was growing up. But I think if I had someone in my life who was like a close family friend or family member who truly didn't believe, but was just the nicest person, salt of the earth kind of person, and it's funny though. Now I say that, I will add this. I had an uncle who'd married into the family, not by blood, but an uncle who was actually an atheist, is an atheist. And I remember that the rest of my family growing up was primarily Christians, and they vilified him. They're like, yeah,
Not shocked.
he's don't listen to him. But if I could have had someone really close, I think it would have made a difference. And I think just the fact that you're there, like, it's an option. You could be a Christian, but you could also not be. It's perfectly fine. You pick your choice. But I love too just the idea to add just the, like, we're talking about what we're doing. We're giving them this gift of freedom and thought autonomy, but too just what we're depriving them of, meaning in a good sense, depriving them of vocabulary like you're a sinner, you're wicked. It's such a cool thing to think. I mean, a lot of my kids hear both sides of it. But for families where it's like a done issue, it's like you're not going to grow up at all thinking you're a sinner, and that's such a cool thing. It's such a cool thing.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Her kids never even heard about hell, even when she was Christian, which is amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because again, my husband, he wasn't like a real strong believer in any way. I'd say he was more agnostic, if anything, but he really tried for my sake. So I just didn't push those ideas, because I thought, they also freaked me out as a kid, and I just thought there's no reason to freak my kids out. Like, one day they'll learn about those things as they get older, but as kids they don't need to learn about it. So thankfully they don't have to.
We never talked about it.
We just never talked about hell with them. So.
We used to get shown videos a lot at youth group. I was curious if you had this, where you'd have like kids out partying and then they get in a car accident and suddenly they're all like in front of hell or something, or the judgment seat.
Oh my God.
And like, somebody was telling me in an interview last night that they used to do this thing where they would actually get a real coffin and they would put a mirror in it and then make you look in so you'd see yourself and imagine you're going to be there someday
Oh
soon.
my God.
Oh,
Just, yeah,
That's
just,
abuse.
it really is. It
yeah,
really is.
no,
But to make you,
no.
the idea is to make you serious about the fact that you're going to face, God someday, and you have to be serious about it. But it's so cool to think kids will either, in our circles, will either not have that, or they
Mhm.
will understand that it's mythology. And
Yeah.
I love that. It kind of feels like to me like I don't know what a person really would look like who just completely grew up without any of this nonsense. Like it just, most of my circle of friends are people who are talking about we were all in it and it hurt us and now we're recovering and we're making new choices. But I don't know that many people that would say, I never believe this stuff. I can't relate
I,
and my life's great. It's always been that way.
I've been going on dates with men like that. They're like, I can't even relate to the stuff you've been through. I've never believed this is never, they're fascinated. I introduced them to like Stacie's show and videos, and they watch it and they're like, I cannot even relate to any of this. This is amazing. Like we're like this science
Yeah.
experiment.
It is. It's crazy.
Go down
Yeah.
the rabbit hole.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I know I've asked you a lot of questions. I did want to ask, is there anything you want to tell us about maybe kind of any aspirations with you all are very talented. Obviously, you have the ability to sway audiences and make people laugh. What would you say are some of the projects on your hearts? Not necessarily, official projects, but just what's something that we'll see you on publicly in the next few years? Like, what do you all want to do to make your voice stronger in the community?
Well,
Unless it's a secret, of course.
No. We're gonna be starting our own channel of doing our own YouTube thing together.
Nice.
So I've had a lot of people kind of inquiring just because they see me on Secular Soapbox and doing, interviews. And then my mom is super active in the chat. And then because of her being active, they want to interview her, kind of like what you have asked her to come on. And then they're just like, you guys need to do something together because
we never shut up.
Yeah.
And when we're together in the kitchen and we just yip, I'm like, people would love to hear the things we talk about. And we've been a little subdued here today, but when we get going, I'm like, we talk about everything. I'm like, people in her age group, my age group, I think they'd be interested in some of the things we talk about and the stories we have, the thing, and
also like deconverting together.
So, apparently that's not common. So
so
they must do a vlog where it's not even official. You just kind of sit down for a meal and just have your coffee and just kind of chat, but with the camera going in the background.
Oh yeah.
You have a glass of wine, we get real loose lips.
Oh, I know. Yeah. So
that's
so
awesome.
we will be doing that very, very soon.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, once you have it, let me know. We'll for anyone that's watching this, maybe a few weeks down the line, we'll have the link for the video and I'll put it in our older interview.
Yeah, if you just link my YouTube name, Apostasy, it'll show to where the channel will be, and I have a little disclaimer saying like stay tuned.
Nice.
That's where it will be.
Yeah, we've already got a lot of followers and we haven't got our first video up.
I already got quite a few.
That's awesome. Well, I look forward to seeing what you've got to come. And I did just want to say thank you all for your story. I know you've been doing the route, talking to a lot of people in different venues, both separately and together. But I appreciate what you're doing. It's really cool. And
we appreciate you.
We appreciate you and what you're doing.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
Just know that you are very valuable.
Yeah, you are.
Space, so
yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It definitely helps to get those messages because there's a lot of messages coming the other direction saying it's a bad thing. So I appreciate the positive.
No. Keep doing it. And I can't wait to see. I mean, I've been watching your subscriber count go up. Just so you know, I check periodically, and when I check and see, I'm like, oh, I'm so happy. So I just want to see your channel continue to grow.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really cool to see that. And I think, in some ways, I do wonder if it's going to kind of be a groundswell where there's more and more people realizing that this stuff doesn't make sense. And I think eventually stories like ours, where it's like, okay, only 1,000 people have seen this, over time, people are going to want to go back and see that. And it definitely feels like this is again, to quote a biblical phrase, for such a time as this with Esther, like, this is critical.
Sometimes we'll be joking around and something will happen and either she or I will say, isn't God so good?
Yeah. And then the other day, after I did my interview or my show with Jimmy Snow, my mom said, "Isn't it just for such a time as this?"
Yeah.
Exactly.
You
But I think too,
you have to laugh, right?
yeah, absolutely. And I think too, in the terms of the politics, especially, for sure. I don't know, honestly, forgive me for this, but I don't know too much about politics in Canada. But the politics in America are pretty concerning, and I think Christian
Yeah.
nationalism
yeah.
is on the rise. So in some ways, it feels like, yeah, I want to grow the channel so it's more of an encouragement to people who just
Yep.
need it to talk through this stuff. But in some ways, we could be influencing people that might influence political things, and it's like
Absolutely.
this could be a bigger deal than we even imagine to
Oh,
have these
it is, yeah.
conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
We need to be here for one another.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much. I definitely want to do it again sometime, and especially
Yeah.
want to say, can't wait to see your channel start and grow for YouTube, and appreciate your story. You all are awesome, and thank you so much, Dee. Thank you so much for
Thank
sharing your story
you.
today too, and Stacie, thank you
Thank
for
you.
adding to it.
Oh, you're very welcome.
All right. Thanks again. Have a great day.
Thank
You too.
Bye bye.